This episode is sponsored in part by Real-Time CTMS, a leading provider of innovative software solutions for clinical trial research sites, site networks, sponsors, and CROs. To get a free demo, check out their website at realtime-ctms.com and complete one of their contact forms. Hello and welcome to the Note to File podcast, a collection of interviews, best practices, and candid commentary for clinical research sites. I'm your host, Brad Hightower. Today on the show, we have Deena Bernstein. Deena has been involved in the clinical research industry for 22 years. Her first 20 years were spent operating and developing site networks for large healthcare organizations, CROs, and IROs. Currently, Deena is the VP of Customer Success at Datacubed Health, a technology solutions provider. In this episode, we discuss reducing site burden, gamification in the ePRO eCOA space, and the ever-present silos in clinical research. Without further ado, Deena Bernstein. All right, Deena, thank you so much for coming on today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Brad.
Absolutely. You're in Florida, is that right?
I am in Florida. This time of year, people get a little bit jelly. Weather's pretty good here today, a little overcast, but generally it's been really nice. And this is the time you want to be living in Florida.
Yeah, I was going to say we just had several inches of snow here in Oklahoma last week, and I'm a little jealous of you out there in Florida. So
next time maybe we can do this in person.
There you go. All right. So yeah, I like to, pretty much start most of my shows the same. Kind of curious to hear a little bit about how you got into clinical research and maybe kind of your story to where you are today.
Sure. So my story is probably a lot like others, where I didn't set out to get into the clinical research industry, and I kind of fell into an opportunity. I was working for a large physician management organization in a physician liaison type role. And we started acquiring practices. We were present in hospitals, community-based hospitals across the country. And we started to hear about our doctors that were either doing clinical trials or wanting to get involved in clinical trials. And since those physicians were employees, that was a little bit concerning to our leadership and especially our legal team from a risk management perspective, where if they were participating in these trials, how did we not know? So I was tasked with going out and investigating which groups were participating in trials and how big their programs were and what was really going on. And I came back to our leadership and told them, yeah, there are clinical trials going on. There's people even that have been hired exclusively to work on clinical trials in some of our practices. And I presented it as an opportunity where this is something that, maybe we can make a go of this and, create a business unit out of clinical research. And, that would bring more prestige to our institutions and also to our physicians and our organization as a whole. So they went for it. And next thing I know, I was promoted to director of clinical research, not knowing anything about clinical research. So found my way through like most people do when they first get started, by trial and error and just jumping in and doing, at that point, it was just me. Hired our first coordinator. And then from there, we centralized our services and grew tremendously. And after about 4 years of doing that, I realized, how much I had learned, but wanted to go back to school to put some education behind my knowledge. So I went and applied to George Washington University for their clinical research administration program. And I got my master's in clinical research administration. So that's how I got my start. After 18 years at that particular organization, I was recruited by then Quintiles, which quickly became IQVIA, and started their first site network.
Nice. Did you find the sort of bridge from site to CRO, was that challenging, or do you think that was it pretty an intuitive, I guess, evolution for you?
Well, I mean, for me personally, it was first nature. Like, I knew exactly what I needed to do, but going into a large global organization was, definitely a bit of a challenge because I didn't really understand what went on the other side of a CRO. While we worked at arm's length distance from the CRO, there was still an organization behind me that was quite different from the one I had come to. So while CROs are very, very interested in what sites we're doing and thrived on, everything they could learn about, the sites, some of them had never stepped foot in a site. So there was a bit of a disconnect, and trying to bridge that gap at times was challenging, but, a remarkable experience also.
So, I mean, that's an interesting observation. Do you think that still holds true today, and even maybe in some cases more so, as we see so many vendors coming to market under sort of the DCT umbrella? Do you think that there's still a bit of a disconnect between some of these vendors and then traditional sites, or even the sort of new models of sites? Do you think that's a continuing problem? I feel like I observe a disconnect at times. Do you feel that?
I do. I don't want to call it a disconnect. I am the optimist that anything can be solved with some education and meaningful discussions. But absolutely, everybody has their own story and comes to it from a different angle based on the work that they're doing, or where where they came from in the continuum of clinical research in the industry. So. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we can overcome, any hurdles, but you first have to identify what those hurdles are and then find solutions.
Sure. Yeah. And no, I don't mean to paint any sort of pessimistic picture. I think it's for whatever reason, I feel like there's just we seem to be uniquely siloed in clinical research. Maybe I'm wrong. Obviously, I've been in primarily this industry for quite some time now, but there's so many stakeholders, involved in execution of any one study. And then, at times it just seems like the communication doesn't flow all directions, I guess, which again is just a sort of interesting observation. And I see, especially as things begin to change, as we sort of, really the paradigm starting to change of what happens in clinical research.
Yeah.
And, some hoping that doesn't, create further problems. Again, I'm with you. I think it could for sure be overcome, and I think we're seeing that more and more now.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting. I don't know. I guess in some ways it surprises me that studies are successful just because there's so many ways for communication or information to sort of fall. Like we play these long games of telephone. So I don't know. It's just an interesting observation to me that I found it interesting for you to point out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that DCTs have brought a whole new level of complexity to our industry. I mean, look what we had to do, and with really very little preparation or notification, the way that, the pandemic played out, and we had to really, pivot to, I hate to use that word pivot. That seems like the word of the year, but
Sure.
truly that's what we did, right? We had to, keep participants that were currently involved in clinical trials engaged. And how are we going to do that? We were, shown ways that we were never, able to use before, with, the regulatory agencies endorsing and allowing for us to, jump to an e-consent model or a televisit without any real preparation, or, now the way that we're seeing it, how it's introduced to sites. There's trainings and other things involved, but look what we did in such a very short amount of time. And it's quite remarkable and, commendable for those that were able to make it work, and, for the participants that continue to stay engaged in the midst of, a global pandemic. It's really, really an amazing time to be in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I could not agree more. It's very exciting times, and I mean, I love it. That's why we do what we do, right? That the hope that we're going to continue to contribute to the change that makes us a little bit better at what we do.
Yeah.
So you came from sort of I don't even know what you would call your original there, almost like a site network, or
Yep.
in a way, to the CRO side, but still working with sites, it sounds like, or sort of site focused.
Yeah.
And then at some point, you came back to the site side. Is that fair?
Yes, I did. After I left IQVIA, I did work for an integrated research organization that had a little bit of tech involved, as well as a site network, and a little bit of CRO work in there and drug development. So we were kind of involved in everything, which was an amazing opportunity at Circuit Clinical, where I did some consulting and then worked for them full time for a while to help them expand their sites during the pandemic. And that in itself is a story that for another day. But I mean, probably one of the craziest things that I've ever done in my career, and during a time of uncertainty. And then from there, I landed in my current role, which is the Vice President of Customer Success at Datacubed Health, which is a complete 360 from what I've done, what I had done from the previous 20 years of my career. So now I'm working for a technology solutions provider where we are an ePRO decentralized model provider to sponsors and CROs, but bringing, that site-centric and participant-centric breadth to everything that we do. And it's been so exciting for me to broaden my horizons and do something that when I started, I knew very little about, except for being that end user, and I'm here at Datacubed almost a year. And I mean, I like to tell people I love waking up every day and going to work, but my litmus test is, how do you feel on Sunday night? And when I go to bed on Sunday night, I can't wait to wake up and take on the day. So
yeah, that is a good, I like that. That's a good standard. If you feel dread on Sunday night, then maybe it's time to
exactly.
figure something else out.
Does that change? Yeah.
So something else interesting that you said, and maybe brings another question to my mind. Do you feel like the way the industry is moving, the lines are starting to blur a little bit between a DCT provider or vendor and a CRO, and even in some cases site networks and CROs? Do you think that, do you feel like those lines are starting to blur a little bit as, the industry starts to change?
I'm not really seeing the blurred lines there, maybe because I haven't been operating sites for over a year, but I kind of still see things the way that they were. There's sites, there's different kinds of sites, there's sponsors, there's CROs, and there's also solution providers. Sometimes they're integrated within certain organizations, like a site might have their own technology for telemedicine, or sponsors or more so CROs might own a solution provider that they're introducing to a specific study. But I kind of think the way that it plays out, it's still the same as it always was. Maybe not through others' lens, but the processes are still very much the same. The trainings that are made available are still the same. The business practice of it is still the same to me anyway.
Sure. Fair enough. It occurs to me that some of these DCT providers or vendors, in some ways start to bleed over into a little bit of almost a CRO type role. Again, I could be wrong, but in some ways it seems like that could be an interesting evolution potentially for some of these companies. But again, I think we're still pretty early, aren't we, in the game? There's still a lot of people coming to market. So again, very exciting and an interesting time.
I agree. It is, still early on in the market for, seeing how things are going to play out for the future. But with that said, the bleeding in, if it were that, we want to make it as seamless for the sites and reduce the burden. So if it does all appear to be one, hoping that would be easier for the sites to implement the DCT models. I think that would probably be viewed as a good thing, as opposed to all these different tentacles that they're working with.
Yeah, I know. I don't think there's any question about that. Any given day, you'll hear me complain about how many different systems we log into, and how some of them talk and some of them don't. And it's very frustrating if you're, especially if you're a coordinator who's working, even 5 or 6 studies. You don't want to be dealing with 25 different vendor websites or provider websites. That can be maddening.
Yeah, it is maddening. And, I'm very involved with SCRS, the Society for Clinical Research Sites. Also, since I've been with Datacubed Health, we've implemented a site and patient advisory boards. So we can be very close to what those pain points are for, the sites and the participants. And that helps us to design products that are easier and intuitive and, better for everybody to use. We could glean so much information in talking to sites and also learning about what those, trainings look like and trying to remember passwords and, having so many and, what training in itself, how we can make it, easier and maybe create better trainings and support desk and making that, available to participants and sites when they get stuck.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess that kind of brings me to a little bit more about Datacubed Health. You guys, is it, again, fair to say from the outside, you guys are like an eCOA solution primarily, do you think? Or I guess tell me a little bit more about what Datacubed does.
Yeah, we are an eCOA, ePRO solution, but we do have, a full host of decentralized capabilities. It's an app. It's called Linked. What's so cool about Datacubed Health is that we focus on patient engagement. We have some really awesome compliance rates. And the reason for that is because we're backed by behavioral science, and that's with intention. So our founder, Paul Glimcher, who's a physician, studied behavioral economics his whole career. He's a professor and world-renowned person in behavioral economics. So all of that was taken into consideration in the design of our app. And that's what drew me to Datacube, because once I looked at this app, I was kind of blown away and thought to myself, oh my gosh, if I could have, been using Linked and been able to, provide this to my participants or at the site level, I think things would have looked a lot different for retention and long-term engagement, especially in those long-term trials where participants might lose interest in completing the e-diary. We've got these motivational intervals. Participants can create avatars in the likeness of themselves. We make participation fun. Participants go through a journey. They can win gems when they complete certain tasks within their trial. And it's frictionless, it's fun, and they also get positive surprises, which inspire curiosity and keep them coming back throughout the journey. So it looks and feels a lot different than some of the other products on the market, and that's what makes me super excited.
No, that's awesome because it's becoming pretty common that, in order for a patient or participant to qualify through even the screening process, they may be having to do an e-diary on a regular basis. And frankly, a lot of I'd say almost every e-diary solution I've seen is pretty bland, to say the least, and frankly, just bad for a majority of them. So I love that. And not just it's a process we hate. Like, we hand somebody an old phone from 2008 or whatever that's got one app on it, and it's
right.
It's not, it seems like it should be easy, but it's not. Yeah. And so, the sites waste time by having to, I can't tell you how many phone calls we've taken at 11 o'clock at night because somebody's e-diary isn't working correctly. Right.
I've been there. I know exactly what you're saying. And that's what the big draw was for me.
Yeah. Right.
I appreciate what you're saying and what you've gone through, or, back in the day before It was even a phone, it was this giant handheld device sitting on a cradle that couldn't hold a charge. Oh my gosh. I'm dating myself, but yeah, the app is super easy and.
Well, it looks like maybe there's some level of gamification maybe that's sort of baked into the app too, which I think is honestly a awesome idea. I don't know why we haven't seen more of that.
Yeah, you're right on top of things in that assessment. Gosh, even the color of our confetti is by design. And how do you feel when you see confetti?
Right. Yeah. You can't not be happy when you see confetti, right?
I love confetti.
But and again, that doesn't maybe seem, like it's rocket science, but if it's engaging to participants, they're going to stay better engaged. And so
Exactly.
no, I love the concept. So you guys, why don't you go ahead and get involved in some of our studies, please, so we can use that.
We'd love to.
No, that's awesome. So, okay, no, I love the sort of trajectory of your career. I mean, I think that's fascinating in a lot of ways, because I think a lot of people start out at the site level, don't really know where to go or maybe how to get there. And especially now, there's beginning to be just more and more options outside of just, going and applying at a CRO, especially as more, service providers come to the market. I think that's, again, really, really fascinating. Is there any specific tips you might give to somebody who's maybe at a site level who's looking to expand into maybe a different segment of the market?
Yeah. So just taking things back to where I started, I really felt when I started in the clinical research business that used the word siloed earlier on. I felt siloed. I was working for this large organization that really was focused on physician management. And I didn't have my own people to say, to share ideas with, or to grow, or to even just colleagues to talk to about some of the challenges in clinical research. So what I did was I started to find ways to get involved in the industry. And really, I was nobody sitting in Sunrise, Florida, working in clinical research, but didn't know a single soul outside of, my own circle of influence and organization. So I joined DIA. I became a member DIA just to learn more about the industry, because I came into it with very little knowledge, and I really had the thirst for knowledge and was enjoying what I was doing, but realized I was a novice. So I never said no to anything. I got involved with groups like DIA, SCRS, ACRP, Magi, and that's where I started to build my network of people like me. And that's how I learned. And that's how I got to know people. And then the next thing that I did was kind of to offset the cost back then was I started to face my fears of, speaking. So I started to volunteer to speak. And let me just tell you, this was not an easy task for me back then. I was shaking at the thought of it, and I developed that skill. And, now it comes pretty natural to me 20 years later, but, I still have a little bit of stage fright, but, just getting involved in your industry. And that's kind of what brought opportunity to me. And that's how that flow started. But find what inspires you. And if you feel like you need a change, don't be afraid to put yourself out there and look for other opportunities. So again, just finding what inspires you. Right now, it's still staying close to participants and sites as much as possible, and gaining that feedback, which is so valuable, because I'm in a position now where we are creating tools and solutions for sites and participants, but our customers that buy our products are sponsors and CROs. But you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're not listening to what sites and participants are saying, you're missing the mark completely.
Yeah, well, and I think that's an interesting sort of dynamic. Is I think the customers are, customer, quote unquote, is person paying for it, your sponsors and your CROs, but the end user are the participants, and by some extension the sites. So I think it's really easy for things to get sideways, because you want to design it for the person who's buying it. Maybe you're not always keeping in mind the person who's actually using it. Who's it actually easy for, right? So it's not surprising why that could get sort of a little bit messy at times. But again, I think people are realizing that more and more, and people like you are out there keep everybody in line with each other.
Just customer listening, and is so key to my role. So I listen to it from every angle, but really we design, like you said. I know the frustration. I've been there. I've walked in those shoes. I know that sites sometimes get bogged down, and there's with so many different studies and trainings and delays, and then maybe you're learning about a tech solution for your study, but then really not able to use it for 3 to 6 months later. So you forget.
Right.
So just even something as simple as how you present your training is really key to how, the sites are going to explain it to the participant or how they're going to use it.
Yeah. And something simple like that where, I can't see what the participant's seeing on their e-diary. So how can I troubleshoot with them?
Help.
And sometimes something as simple as that doesn't get accounted for in the, communication or training with the site. So yeah, I don't want to get going too much on complaining about the e-diary process. So no, I love that. I love going back to what you said about, just putting yourself out there. I think that's a different, again, for whatever reason, I think generally, not to be too blanketed, but again, sites don't talk a lot. I feel like we're seeing it more and more. But in a lot of ways, I envy the sponsor CRO side with things like, even like DTRA, where a lot of people are coming together and discussing sort of, higher concept ideas, but they're all from, ostensibly competing companies, right?
Yeah, we're all coming together. We're a member of DTRA, and I'm working on the patient journey initiative. It's really amazing to bring all those stakeholders together, and some of them are our competitors, but everybody's very forthcoming with information, which is nice to see. And I feel the sites were always like that for me. If you're stuck on something, it's probably something that another site that might be a competitor has also experienced. But from the site's perspective, when you go to a meeting like SCRS or Magi or ACRP, and you're talking to people, like yourself, like-minded people that have gone through that same struggle, they share and they're, everybody's out really, I think, at least with what I found, to help each other and to, we're all in it for the common goal of bringing drugs to market faster, safer for participants or patients really in need.
No, I love it. I agree. I think it's getting easier too for people to share that information, right? Even I'm still blown away every day by just LinkedIn and how many people are on there, having really actually engaging conversations, right? I mean, publicly. And I think that needs to happen, more. So, I mean, again, I think that's, now more than ever, the ability exists for you to reach out and sort of expand your network. And like you said, surround yourself with more like-minded people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. When you said LinkedIn, I mean, I lit up. That's like seeing confetti for me. I always tell people that LinkedIn is really such a powerful tool, and never underestimate the power of LinkedIn.
Right.
I've met so many people through LinkedIn, you included. And, just getting involved, even if you can't attend a meeting, getting involved in LinkedIn, making, meaningful friendships or connections in LinkedIn can happen. And it's really powerful.
Yep, I agree. Well, Deena, where can people find you online?
They can find me on LinkedIn for sure. Reach out anytime. Also, my email address is Deena, Deena Bernstein, Bernstein @datacubed.com. And that's DATACUBED.com. Or at datacubed.com, you can learn more about, the cool stuff that we're doing with the linked app.
All right, perfect. I'll make sure we have your contact info in our show notes. And I just want to thank you for coming on. Anything before we go?
No, just thank you for the opportunity. It's been really nice to meet you. And I'm sure you and I will stay in touch and look forward to that.
All right. Thanks, Deena.
Thanks, Brad. Bye-bye.
As always, thanks so much for listening to the Note to File podcast. For episode transcripts and guest contact information, please check out our website at notetofilepodcast.com.